Your deepest insecurities are completely brought to the surface when you launch something.
Welcome to the Passion Pursuit podcast. I'm your host, Haley Thomas, and I'm obsessed with helping you create a business that supports the life you dream about. I'm a multi-passionate creative who let her curiosity take her down the unconventional path of entrepreneurship. I have worked with many entrepreneurs just like you who desired to make an impact and an income by doing what lights them up. Get ready to learn about the strategies, shifts, and stories that will equip and inspire you to take action. This is the space where dreams become reality. All right, my friends, welcome back to another episode of the Passion Pursuit podcast. I want to dig right into this today because what I have for you is pretty dang good, if I do say so myself. And it is something that will resonate with everyone who is in the process of launching something or has never launched or basically launching, which is essentially a huge aspect of any sort of business you do, whether you launch services, products, a whole business in general. And so today you are going to listen to this episode and probably be like, yes, girl, I get it. I feel that. I am in that. I am living and breathing that launch process. And I want to speak to this topic of the mindset when we go into launching, okay? And I've talked about this a little bit when I've described, starting this podcast, for example, and the launch of this podcast. And as I was doing this and putting this together and getting it out there for the world, I was feeling about every single emotion that you could possibly feel in what I call the emotional cycle of an entrepreneur. From excitement and joy that I was pursuing this dream that I wanted to do for so long to having nightmares, legit nightmares the week of launch of like, what if something goes wrong? Or what if I totally mess up the tech? Or what if someone really doesn't like something that I have to say? Like all of these wild, wild thoughts when it came to getting this thing out into the world. And I will tell you that that week leading up to it, I did not sleep at all. And if I didn't have other people involved in getting this thing out there into the world and having me be accountable to this, I honestly may have chickened out. Like, I'm not going to lie. I had a moment a couple days before the podcast where I was like, maybe I should wait. Maybe I should press pause. Maybe I should hold. And I kind of started to stop myself before I even let it get out there into the world. And I feel like we don't talk about this enough when it comes to launching and the mindset and everything that goes in that. And I want to put a spotlight on this today because I think that we as business owners, we're going through this process constantly, right? And if we can better equip and prepare ourselves before we begin, we're going to have a lot smoother launch. We're going to feel a lot better and things are just going to run a lot more smoothly than we could have ever expected. So digging in today, my goal for this episode is for you to realize that you are not alone and that when you're building your launch for whatever it is that you are doing next, you are ready to take it all the way through to the finish line, okay? We're not like launching something and ghosting halfway through anymore. Launching in analogy terms is like running a marathon. You have to train for it. And in this sense, I would say one of the most important things you can do is actually training the mind and prepping the mind before you even begin the launch process. So we don't want you starting this and getting into mile 3 and then saying, nope, I'm tapping out, and you ghost before you even begin. Like your ideas, your vision, the things that you want to create are meant to get out there into the world. And so I want to go through some things that will help you to kind of see where you may be on that emotional cycle so you can better support yourself in moving all the way through it rather than keeping yourself stagnant or completely pulling yourself out of the race before you even made it to the halfway point, let alone the finish line. So in talking about this, I recently heard this and I was like, honestly, truth, like full on truth, preach, you said it, I agree. And it was your deepest insecurities are completely brought to the surface when you launch something. Like if you want to know what you are still needing to heal internally, go launch something and it will tell you everything that is under the surface that you thought maybe you moved through or maybe you healed or you've grown past that. I'm telling you, go launch something. It will bring up everything that you didn't realize you suppressed, and it will also help you to heal those parts that you covered up. I say this a lot of the times with starting a business, but I think especially when it comes to launching something, it is like a giant personal development course that we didn't know we were signing up for. And if you see it that way, you'll begin to appreciate the process a little bit more because at the end of the day, it then becomes about the learning, right? And I've said this before and I'll say it again. If we're not learning, we're not growing. So, welcoming this, knowing that every emotion is going to come up, it is going to teach us a lot in the process. It is going to teach us what works. It is going to teach us what doesn't. It's going to teach us how we can better prepare ourselves. It's going to teach us what we need to support ourselves through this. And it's going to teach us a lot about just the whole process in general. So, I want to take you through this, and I have this graphic that I will share on social media and maybe even somehow attach in the show notes because I'm such a visual person and I want you to see this. But essentially, we're looking at this from a circle standpoint, okay? So, emotion number one, when you enter the arena of the emotional cycle, is excitement, okay? This one's pretty self-explanatory. Like when you have an idea, obviously you're like stoked about it, right? Like if it's something you really want to launch and something you want to put out into the world, chances are you're going to be pretty thrilled and pretty stoked about what it is that you're creating. And so you enter the arena, you're ready to go. You're like, yes, people need this. I'm so ready to get this out there. I know exactly why they need this. And you go, you're starting. And oftentimes too, in race terms and the analogy there, it's the same thing, right? Like when you begin a marathon or a half marathon, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this thing. I'm ready. I've been training for this moment. And you're excited when you start. And then we get like mile, let's say 1 or 2 down. And then you start to be like, okay, this is not maybe as fun as I thought it was going to be. I am having this cramp in my side. I am hungry. I just want to get to like the end of the race where you get all the free snacks, or if you're in Wisconsin, the free beer that they have at the end of the race. And you begin to be frustrated, which is the second emotion in the emotional cycle. And this can look in business like tech difficulties or more stress because you're doing something that's also stacking on top of your normal business operations, or you have this new routine of figuring things out. Or maybe there's even crickets in the beginning of your launch. Like maybe you put something out there and you're like, people are going to sign up for this the moment it's released. And then you go to put it out there and there's silence. And then you're like, what the heck? How can people not want this? What is wrong? And you start to get in that state of frustration. Okay. So when you're in this state, and if that's you in this moment, in this season, you may be trying to do it all yourself. You may be stressing yourself out. You may be keeping your frustrations to yourself. And maybe you're only expressing them to your spouse rather than to like a mentor community. Maybe you're distracting yourself. That's typically the actions that come when we're in that state of frustration in our business and especially in a launch. So, how can we support ourselves when we're in this state to kind of move through it? Well, one, I would say having a community, having a mentor, having a community that you can have that space to be honest about what is present. A lot of the times emotions just need to work through us. And to do that, we need to have the space to process them, to let them out, whether that's a coach, whether that's a community, a friend, a therapist, some space that you can really let things move through you so that you don't let them get stuck inside and keep them blocked from where you want to go and what you want to create. Another thing that can really help in this frustration is to have some sort of project management system, having something like Asana or ClickUp or Trello or Google Sheets or something that keeps you on track and keeps you moving the needle so that rather than letting emotions dictate what you do on the day, you already know, like, this is the launch plan. This is exactly how I need to show up to move the needle and to get my product or service out into the world. And also, too, I would say the last thing to help you move frustration or move through frustration would be to ask for help. If something comes up in this process where you're like, oh my gosh, I actually did not anticipate this. This is not in my wheelhouse. I don't know what I'm doing here. Like, there's somebody out there who is ready to support you in that. And maybe it's an opportunity for you to stretch that muscle of receiving that support. So don't be afraid to ask for help. And then we move into emotion number 3, which tends to be after frustration, shock. And this can look like you're kind of looking at social media and the engagement's not as near as good as you thought it was going to be, or again, you have less response than you thought. Maybe you're getting questions coming in that you did not anticipate from miles away, or maybe there's more to do than you realize and you're stressing yourself out a little bit because you're like, wow, this is a lot more in depth than I thought it was going to be. I mean, even for me, you guys, with this podcast, I'm in it. We're recording, we're editing, and I'm thinking like, oh, we're golden, things are good to go. And then I'm like, show notes. Oh my gosh, show notes. There's like a whole other aspect of this thing that I like didn't even think about. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, what's gonna go in those show notes? I have like links that I want to send people to, or I want to create, a freebie, or maybe they want to apply to work with me after listening. Like, I don't have any of this put together. And I realized that show notes are with every single episode. So again, this thing became bigger than I anticipated because I'm still learning. It's a completely new thing for me. And that can happen a lot of times when we're launching something new, right? Especially if you're going through the process the first time. Chances are you don't know what you don't know. And there's going to be things that come up that you never saw coming. So be prepared for a little shock factor, okay? And when you're in this emotion, business wise, you may find yourself beginning to retreat. Maybe you are posting less. Maybe you begin to be nervous to share on social media. Maybe you start questioning yourself and why you decided to do this. And so it's just good to be aware. Like, if you're in that state, okay, I'm in shock. How can I move myself through this? How can I support myself? So one thing I would say is to prep yourself ahead of time, like before you even get into shock. Like when you are deciding to launch something, answer the questions: why am I creating this? Why does this matter? And who needs it? Okay. When you have those questions, it really can help you to drive that process and keep that at the forefront so you are reminded why this matters, right? Like that's going to motivate you to keep going, even when you are feeling overwhelmed, shocked, frustrated, whatever you're feeling. And I would say too, and this is, oh my goodness, this is easier said than done. Something I am continuing to learn is to trust the process. There is this phrase that my mentor, Morgan Northway, she shares with me, and it is: invisible progress is always happening. And there are pieces moving, there are people watching, there are things happening that we do not see. And it is important to be open to that. And it is important to trust that there is more at play than we even know yet. Okay. So I know it's so hard for me to be like, trust the process. Like that sounds so fluffy and easy. And I'm here to tell you that's honestly probably the hardest thing, but the most important thing to keep at the forefront of the mind is that this process is important. Like keep showing up, keep trusting that there is more to be revealed. And connect with your people, right? Like if you are in that state where you're shocked or you're frustrated or things aren't going to plan, this may be an opportunity to get into the trenches with your people and ask questions, create conversation. Sometimes it's not the offer that is misaligned, but it actually could be the messaging of the offer. But we won't know that unless we have conversations with our people. And so when in doubt, ask questions. When in doubt, put a few polls up on Instagram. When in doubt, check in with someone who is a past client of yours and be like, hey, what are your thoughts on this? Is this something that's needed? In what way? Like, how did you feel before you had this versus after? Like, get back to the people, okay? So once we move through shock, we then move into emotion number 4, which is denial and fear. This is where we start to ghost, okay? This is where you're like, nope, I'm gonna tap out. No one's gonna see if I sneak on out of this race and go like to the finish line and grab my free snack. Like no one's gonna know. Maybe too many people didn't see this. So if I just tap out now, it won't be so embarrassing to quit, right? And we start to like remove ourselves from the process because we're so scared of what the outcome will be. This may look like procrastinating. This may look like we are maybe acting like we're not launching at all. So maybe we start posting about other things really fast or whatever the case may be, okay? And this may also be when imposter syndrome rears its ugly head. You may start to feel awkward. You may feel embarrassed, shame, frustration, all the things, all of the emotions I feel are really present when we get into the state of fear. And this is the spot where we really have to give ourselves the space to let that fear be heard. And I know that sounds so silly, but a lot of the times when I'm in that state of fear, it's a reminder that I need to slow down. And even if that's just a minute, to take a step back and be like, okay, what is really scaring me right now about this? Is this a life or death matter? And I start to just kind of minimize the extent of that fear a little bit. I bring it back into a more manageable state, in a space where I kind of take that, I don't want to say control back, but in some ways it's taking that ownership back of, okay, why am I even scared? Is it worth being scared over? Or is there something that I can do to support myself to remove that fear? Sometimes fear just simply needs to be heard. It needs the space to voice its truth and be present and to be acknowledged, right? And I will tell you that when I acknowledge that I'm scared versus when I try to ignore that it's happening, I am able to move through it so much quicker because I took the time to give it the space. So treating your fear as if it were a person, right? And if that helps you to move through it, by all means, go for it. Like imagining your fear, like what does it have to say? What is it trying to tell you? And what does it need to feel safe, right? Like our fear is designed to keep us safe. And that's a beautiful thing. But the thing is, sometimes we need to take that step back and put fear in the passenger seat so that it's not driving the car. We need to make sure that we're still moving and grooving based off of what our vision is and what our desires are, rather than by what we fear, which is then going to take us off track. So when you're in this state, right? When you're in this state of fear, remind yourself that this is a marathon. And this is the part where often we decide that we want to finish this race that we started. We're setting out to do, even when it's mile 7 and we have no clue how we're going to make it 3 more miles, we are like, we got to keep moving forward. And this is the space where, once again, community is so important. And so how can your community rally around you? Have you asked maybe people to share? Do you have an affiliate program that can support your launch, or something where you are having and welcoming in that support to get your product or service out there into the world? And then lastly, again, asking for help or getting in the trenches with your people once again. Like these are all things that you can repeat all the way through the process, okay? So if fear is present, allow yourself to be open to receive advice, to receive support, to receive help from helping you to get to point A to point B. And as we're moving through this cycle, we move through fear, and then we get to, sometimes we skip this, but a lot of the times we get to anger. And I don't mean in like this ragey, crazy way, or there's nothing, it's not like that, but anger in, we might be pointing the finger at other people. Maybe we're frustrated with a mentor's advice. Maybe we're frustrated that no one's buying. Maybe we're like, oh my gosh, this thing is so good. How could people not want it? And we start to throw that fit. Or maybe we get angry and we're like, I never want to launch anything again. This is stupid. This business is dumb. Like, why did I even think this was a good idea? What's wrong with me? All these things to like put us in that state of a pity party, okay? And what we can do to use anger to actually put us in more of a, I would say like a productive state of anger, is to use it in a way that is like, no. And it reminds us of who we truly are. It's why am I doubting myself? Why am I stopping myself? Like, I know that this is needed. I am passionate about getting this out there. And I don't care if I fail 30,007 times. Like, I'm going to keep going because this matters and this is important to me and people need what I have to offer. Okay. So reminding yourself of why you set out to do this in the first place and recommit. That's where then we move to that final emotion on the emotional cycle, which is recommitting. And what comes from that is expansion. Okay. What comes from that is you decide that you're going to keep the promise to yourself that you are all in on this launch. You are ready to finish strong. You are releasing the outcome, knowing that no matter what, you will either expand your business or you will expand yourself. Because, like I said from the beginning, launching is a learning process and you will always gain something from that. So, whether you learn something for the next time, maybe it's adjusting certain aspects of the offer, maybe it's getting back to doing market research, figuring out the pricing or the messaging, or maybe sometimes it's simply the timing of your offer. A lot of factors go into a successful launch. So rather than making the failure about you, have this as an opportunity, use this as an opportunity to recommit. Look at it from the lens of growing, learning, and opportunity. It's not about you, my friend. It's about the people. And if I can leave you with this today, launching, if I could describe this, is going through a portal of self-growth, okay? You will learn so much about yourself and you will learn so much about your audience in the process. And that's the part that we forget, honestly, that's the part that we need to remember. And it's a huge perk of having a launch is this aspect of all that we were going to learn. I think about, again, leading up to this podcast, the shock was there, the times that I wanted to pull the plug, the doubts that crept in, the lack of sleep that I was having. And then I look at the day that I launched, you guys, and I am a different woman on the other side of putting this out there into the world. I'm a different woman because I chose to keep going in spite of those fears. And the woman on the other side is confident. She's proud of herself for putting herself out there. She believes in what she has to offer. She believes in the value that she wants to share. Okay. So you're not only creating something, but you're becoming someone in the process. They coexist, but nobody ever talks about the becoming aspect. So when we are moving and grooving, remember that there's oftentimes things shifting inside us where once you get to the other side, you're going to be like, oh, wow, I feel different. And that, my friend, is honestly what it's all about. That is a beautiful piece of this, okay? This was not about just the outcome anymore. It's about the process. And that's what a great lesson too. If you think about this in the bigger grand scheme of things, like life is not about the destination. It's about the journey. If we were only ever living for those big moments or those big successes, one would not learn a whole lot. And also too, I don't think it would be as exciting. Like your failures set you up for your greatest successes. Your failures teach you more than you could have ever expected. Your failures help you to grow in ways that you could have never imagined or would never be possible if you didn't fail, okay? So looking at it from the perspective that you are going into whatever it is that you are launching with an open mind and an open heart, knowing that everything along the way is happening for you, for your business, for your growth, and for your future. And that is, like mind-blowing when we actually think about it in that way. So if I can leave you with one final action tip, it would be to create I call it a launch self-care toolkit, okay? So again, I'm coming back to this analogy because it really just makes sense. This aspect of if you're running a marathon, you keep in mind, I want to have shoes that support my feet. I want to have, maybe if you're doing the full marathon, you have that like little belt with you can tell I obviously don't run marathons, but I see people with like the little water bottles that they're ready to go so that they're hydrated throughout. Or maybe they have like the little fanny pack with a granola bar so that they can sustain the energy all the way through. Or maybe they got sunglasses to block out the light, or in launch style, block out the haters, like whatever it may be. Like you have yourself set up to prepare yourself to move all the way through, okay? So these are things that can help you to prepare you for your next launch. And these are things things I would add to your toolkit. One is taking extra care of yourself in the process. Like when you are launching something, your number one priority is your health and keeping like a normal sleep schedule, maybe scheduling workouts and really honoring those promises that you made to yourself, having extra quiet time to meditate or maybe going to yoga, not going caffeine crazy just in launch season, like really supporting your physical body because you're going to need that energy to sustain yourself all the way through the process. Another thing I'd add in my toolkit is having some sort of support system, right? Whether that is a mentor or a community or a friend that can help you to stay in the game and to get you out of your head. Like this is not the place we want to be. We want to get out of the space between our ears and we want to get into motion to doing what we love. So having that support system to cheer you on, to give you that kick in the pants when you need it and to get you moving and grooving is a game changer. When you get started, we want to put in our toolkit this aspect of committing to the process, not the outcome. So making that promise to yourself that you're going to see this thing all the way through. And how do we do that? We create a plan for ourselves. So maybe that is mapping out that launch plan. What do you need 2 months out? Are you doing a pre-launch? What are you doing a month out, 3 weeks out, 2 weeks out, 2 days out? Like really mapping out every aspect of the launch that you're putting out there and the steps that you would like to take so that on those days where you're in your head, you can't chicken out because you've got your to-do list. You know exactly what you need to do and what you need to take care of to move the needle so that, again, your business decisions aren't dictated by how you're feeling that day. So it's going to keep you in that process, okay? And then last thing that I want to remind you is that in the grand scheme of things, this one launch is not forever. How you're feeling in this launch is not forever. These things will pass. And no matter how your launch in your process or in your product or service goes, it doesn't define you, okay? It doesn't define you, your self-worth. It doesn't define your business. It doesn't define your future success. Launching is simply an opportunity to basically go back to school and see what works, what doesn't, what do my clients need, and what can I do to create something even better next time or even better this time. So using that as an opportunity to remind yourself, like, this is not forever. Give yourself the release of pressure to know that this one thing does not define where you're going to go, okay? And even when you're launching your business for the first time, it's the same thing. Like you may put this out there for the first time and it will be full on crickets and you're like, oh my gosh, I am not meant to do this. I can't believe I even thought I was capable of it. And you go into this spiral. Stop yourself before you get there. Have a plan in place to know and to remind yourself that this one thing, this one moment in time of all of the other moments you're going to have does not define your future. You, in this process, as you launch, are going to build a muscle of deep inner trust. And that, my friend, is such a skill worth building. Like you are going to learn to not only trust the process, you're going to learn to trust your vision. You're going to learn to trust your mistakes. You're going to learn to trust your wins, like everything, your ideas. And that is seriously like one of the best things that can come out of launching. So create that toolkit for yourself. Give yourself time to prep and plan. So when you go into your next season of launching, you're ready and excited and you can move through this in a way that feels a little bit less like you're running a marathon with no training, okay? Just giving yourself that grace to move forward in the best way. So I would love to know what aspects resonated with you today. I would love to hear things if they were new, if it was the first time you heard, or maybe something that hit a little bit differently today. If you would do me a huge favor and leave a review and let me know your thoughts, I would love to hear so that I can continue to create content like this and continue to expand the reach to bring even more value to you and those who really need to hear these things on this podcast. So thank you so much again for tuning in and listening, and I will see you on another episode of the Passion Pursuit podcast. See you soon, my friends. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Passion Pursuit podcast. If you loved this, head on over and hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. New episodes drop every week. I can't wait to hang out with you again soon.